Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With me are the journalist Nabila Ramdani and the international criminal solicitor Michael Caplan QC. Welcome back. Tomorrow's front pages then, starting with the Telegraph. It says that senior Labour politicians are worried they'll be painted as the benefits party as they oppose the government's changes to the welfare system. The Express headlines new research into the benefits of statins, a drug used to treat heart disease. The Financial Times leads with austerity in Portugal, but also carries a story about how baby milk formula in the UK could be rationed due to rampant demand in China. New guidelines for employers makes the Daily Mail's front page. It calls the latest Equalities and Human Rights Commission advice an insult to Christians. The Guardian picks up on a warning to GPs that health services need to be smaller and more local. The former chief of HBOS, the bank bailed out by taxpayers, makes the Times front page. It says MPs want Sir James Crosby to sacrifice some of his pension pot. And the Mirror leads with Ryan Mania. Yesterday, of course, he won the Grand National, but today at Hexham he was airlifted to hospital after falling from his horse. So let's make a start, and we'll begin with the Daily Telegraph. And Labour once again apologising, this time, Michael, for how it's tackled welfare and benefits in the past. Yeah,
an awkward situation, I think, for Ed Miliband. On the one hand, he's been someone who's opposed a lot of the cuts, but on the other hand, the Labour Party recognising that the welfare benefits which there are have got to be cut in some way. So, very uncomfortable position. I'd have thought the only winners out of this, quite frankly, are the government, because whereas it was difficult for them, I think we're probably looking at the beginnings of the general election campaign, although it's 2 years away, and here division within the Labour Party. And really the Labour Party have got to decide what they are going to do. Are they going to come forward with their own suggestions, which they do, and we've seen these complex arrangements which have been suggested, I think particularly by Harriet Harman during the day and yesterday, about bringing people back to work and looking at the amounts which people have contributed.
So you'd get more out if you put more in?
Well, indeed, but if we go to assessments, benefit assessments, then I think at the end of the day that may be more costly. So where are we and what's going to happen? And I think it's a very difficult situation.
That's what they always say, a bit about means testing, isn't it? And that's why Ian Duncan-Smith has worked so hard to try to sort of bring around this universal credit, which a lot of people are critical of. But just because they're coming up with their own changes to the welfare system doesn't mean that Labour agree with what the coalition are doing.
Well, absolutely, and disagrees absolutely. The Labour Party disagrees absolutely with what the coalition is doing, and it's part of its conundrum, effectively, because as it is trying to bring about a significant shift in its approach to welfare, these divisions within the party frankly do not come at the right time. The Labour Party is facing a major issue here. It has to revolutionise its approach to the welfare system. It has to shake off this label that it's the benefits party. And dare I say, David Cameron feels vindicated in his reforms by the fact that two polls came out over the weekend. One of them significantly shows that 66% of the population think that the welfare system is broken, while 60% do approve of reforms within the welfare system. So David Cameron has an awful lot on his plate.
And I think a lot of those people, of course, will be those who actually support the Labour Party as well. So it's an added problem for Ed Miliband. What do? Here they have a lot of their supporters who will say, yes, there should be some reforms. And here's the Labour Party themselves saying, well, in fact, we don't want to reform some of the welfare benefits that there are. And of course, you've got this added dimension, it seems to me, the actual huge bill that there is. What is it, £200 billion?
But nearly half of the benefits bill is pensions, and nobody's talking about taking those away from us.
Well, they're not, but whatever it is, it's got to be slashed if what we're told about the economy is believed. And I think we add into another interesting aspect that with the general election, as I say, 2 years away, we're going to hear a lot more about the economy. And I think Danny Alexander yesterday was talking about we're still mending the problems that the Labour Party brought.
Yes, indeed. But I think, crucially, it would be extremely damaging for the Labour Party if they were to be the party that's effectively undoing this universal system, when it is the party that set up this universal approach to benefits and effectively introducing some forms of means testing into, the benefit system. So that would be very damaging indeed. And we have Labour figures saying that the Labour was not set up as a charity or social work organisation. That's not what we are here for. But it has to be noted that one of the founding fathers of the welfare system, Aneurin Bevan, rightly said that, in my view, that it's a social charity. Oh, sorry, I forgot what the quote is now. But
it's a danger that they move too far away from the sort of founding principles, because that's always been one of the tenets for the Labour Party, hasn't it? A lot of detail still to come from the Labour Party. We'll no doubt find out about some of that tomorrow. But the other area for reform, in the view of David Cameron, is our relationship, Michael, with the European Union.
Yes.
He might be ruffling a few feathers this week, as as the Daily Telegraph tells us, he's going to talk about the need for honesty and about the failings of the EU when he visits France, Spain and Germany.
Well, he's going to want back some of the powers that the EU have taken from us. And he's going to be saying, I'm sure, is, look, support for the EU is, and words here use the words wafer thin. And that's what he's going to look to do. And he's going to have a lot of support from the public here, many of which are against the EU. Let's forget the sort of European sceptics. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of members of the public who don't think too much about the European Union. So he's almost on a winner as far as that is concerned. Now, the other aspect is he's going to be talking about, I suspect, a referendum, which he's mentioned in the next Parliament. That's assuming he gets back in the next Parliament. So it's going to be quite a strong and powerful message that he's going to bring to the EU. More flexible approach, I think, is the word he'll use.
But if he pushes too hard, Nabila, will they just say, well, just go then? Don't stay in.
Well, I think there's a feeling that Britain is needed within the European family, even though it's constantly negotiating on its own terms. But there's no doubt that failing or less performing economies like Spain, for example, and increasingly France, it has to be noted, it's in a pretty bad shape economically, and they will need inspiration perhaps from a country like Britain.
Well, that'd be an interesting way of looking at it, wouldn't it? I wonder if they'll see it that way.
Could be the leaders in Europe. Charles, many people here will say, well, we don't need Europe. Whether they're right or wrong, I just don't know.
Again, David Cameron doesn't quite go that far, does he? Let's look at the Financial Times then, and how peculiar. It's a sign of how globalised trade really is, isn't it? With the fact that demand for baby milk formula in China is having a knock-on effect here, Nabila, in supermarkets that are restricting our supply.
Well, absolutely, and it might be that rations might have to be introduced on baby milk effectively because of the increasing demand in China, and that's very much linked to scandals on the domestic market in China, where there were instances, and there's a precise example that's quoted here in 2008, where melanin spike milk killed 6 babies and left 300,000 sick. So the Chinese...
They want foreign milk, don't they? They
absolutely.
Don't want the local
crucially,
brands.
Desperately need overseas manufactured formulas for Chinese babies, and that's having huge strain on markets, including Britain, but also Australia.
I think also, sadly, led to smuggling rings and things like that, which sadly inevitably happens in these circumstances. And knock-on effects, I think the report says that in Hong Kong, for example, that clothes shops have turned into pharmacies in order to meet the milk demand, which is quite extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, a sign of the sort of economic growth and the wealth that's come to China. The Daily Mail has human rights on its front page, as employers are told that they need to give due consideration to the beliefs of Druids and vegans and pagans. The Daily Mail says this is an insult to Christians. How do we feel about that, Nabila?
I'm not too surprised about this front page story, in fact, and I think what it reflects is that traditional religions appear to be getting a lot of kicking at the moment nowadays. I think that's what this story reflects, to the extent that minority groups receive far more respect, and that's, I think, what the Daily Mail is trying to to highlight. I have in fact been working on a story this weekend in Paris about a young Muslim girl who was expelled from school for wearing a headband and a long skirt, and the combination was seen as too religious. So I think this kind of stories just reflect that this kind of perhaps pop atheism, which has become so fashionable amongst Britain's chattering.
Well, I was going to add it. I think it comes on the back of this European Court decision, which said that Christians should be able to wear a cross at work, and this extension of that, the Commission has said, well, look, there's got to be equality. This is their view for all other interests and beliefs.
You have to be able to prove that belief, don't you?
Well, you have to be able to prove that. And I suppose the difficulty here and the dilemma is how far you go down that road. I'm not sure I entirely agree with the headline of the Daily Mail, but of course this is a typical type of story the Daily Mail would use with heavy headlines. You would hope that all groups could have their beliefs respected. It doesn't have to stop at Christians or any other majority religion, does it? Main religion. Let's look at The Guardian now, and it's talking about hospitals must shut or shrink. This is doctors, is it, warning that local is best? Which seems to be at odds with what's actually happening. Yeah, what it seems to be here, and I imagine at the end of the day this is all about money again, is that the clinical commissioning groups, and I have to say I'm not entirely sure who they are, is saying that there's a lot of treatment for and care for the elderly could be carried out locally, not at hospitals, but by those who carry out the care, and I imagine it must mean physiotherapists and various other clinicians. Now, of course, perfectly acceptable, I'm sure, providing that care is of the same standard. But you do have to think, well, why do people go to hospitals? They go to hospitals because they're ill. Secondly, that if that's going to release a number of beds, and I think the report says it will release a percentage of the beds, will that mean that those who are on waiting lists, will they be treated quicker? There's no indication, certainly in the story which I've read, that that will take place. And Nabila, if GPs want this to happen, given that they're going to be controlling a lot of the NHS budget, they can surely bring that about.
Yes, indeed. They have an awful lot of clout here, and they have a big budget to manage £65 billion of health spending. It's interesting to know that in the article, the British Medical Association, which represents most of Britain's doctors, has a different take and doesn't trust this initiative at all. It's very sceptical about the kind of improvement, the so-called improvement that he will bring to people, effectively arguing that, what this group is saying, that you have to be very ill or indeed need specialist care to be admitted to hospital, and for generalist care, then you can...
But the report says, I think, that 50% could be dealt with locally rather than hospitals. Now, if that's right, it would suggest, certainly on looking at it on the face of it, that either there's people who go to hospital, no need to go to hospital, could be dealt with locally by healthcare professionals, who are all very, very good. But secondly, if there's going to be a reduction in the number of people going to hospital, will that mean that those who have to go to be treated better or more quicker? Because we all know the difficulties with waiting lists. I'm sure we've all seen that.
Let's just finally quickly turn our attention, if you can ever deal with the Syrian situation at any speed at all. The Guardian has this story too, saying that Syrian troop withdrawal is threatening peace in the Golan Heights. This is the most significant change in Syrian redeployments in the last 40 years. So something is afoot in that part of the world, Nabila.
Well, absolutely. And one thing that the Israeli governments, the successive governments, found attractive about Assad, if I may put it that way, is that he left that border at peace and never really engaged in confrontational attacks with Israel. But this story is significant because it means that he is effectively using his troops to fight, to deal with the conflict at home.
And taking them away from the Golan Heights, where they've been, as the paper says, for the last 40 years. We've run out of time. There's so much more to talk about, but that's the papers for this evening. Thank you to our guests, Nabila Ramdani and Michael Caplan. Good to have you here with us this evening. Stay with us on BBC News. Coming up next, it's the Film Review.